Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Turfgrass Epistemology. My name is TravisShaddox. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode. We're going to be going over some comments and emails and some Twitter conversations and all sorts of fun stuff. There's quite a bit to get to tonight. This might be rather long, so if you're watching this after it's live and you're just going from hole to hole or you're going from one city to the next, just put it on and hang out and listen to the next hour or so. There's a lot of the comments today are going to be answered in more of an educational way or educational format. There's a couple little rude comments in there here and there that I always like to throw in there, but there's some good questions that require more than just a yes or no answer. Okay, so it'll be sort of a lecture format, I guess. I don't know. Okay, before we get going, I'll be gone 4 of the next 6 weeks. So for those of you who may not be familiar with what I do, I do run a small business with research and consulting and so forth. And I do give talks and do projects during this time of year. So I'll be gone hit and miss here for a while. There'll be a period where I'm gone for 2 weeks in a row. So just stay tuned. I'm going to be releasing little 1 to 5 minute little clips of previous content. Some people like those little videos. They can post them wherever they want to post them. So I'll be doing that periodically in my absence, but unfortunately, there's really not a whole lot I can do about the next couple of weeks. I got to pay the bills and got a lot of traveling to do, several thousand miles of flights and so forth. So on that note, the next place I will be is here at the New England Regional Turfgrass Foundation show next week. It's March 6th or the 7th, and I wasn't ever really sure where it was. I kind of lose track of some of that stuff, but it looks like it's in Providence, Rhode Island. The hotel that I'm going to be at in the conference apparently is at the Rhode Island Convention Center. So if you're in that area and you want to come by and learn about turfgrass and get some CEUs and meet various people or whatever, just, get to know some people, then come on by. I'll be speaking on Monday morning, Tuesday morning, and Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning, Thursday morning, and then there's one afternoon in there I'm speaking. So I'll be speaking quite a bit. Tuesday morning is a 4-hour workshop. So it's a half-day workshop on soil testing. And then the other 3 lectures are just 1 hour quick lectures on simplifying soil tests for turfgrass managers. So please come by if you feel so inclined and say hello, and we'll meet each other. I know there's 1 or 2 listeners that are from that area. So Joe Kyle says it's 45 miles from Joe. I got confused. I thought you were in California. I forgot who was one of the groups from California, but I sometimes get people conflated. So 45 miles from you, my evenings will be free. So if you want to come by and run out and grab something to eat with me and just hang out and have a good time or what? Well, I'm not going to swear you're going to have a good time with me. I'm pretty boring, to be frank. So I know my limitations, and my limitations stop at social interactions. So yeah, Connecticut. Okay, so if you're in Connecticut, I'll actually be flying into Connecticut this Friday, Joe. And unfortunately, I'm going to a service for a really close, longtime friend of mine that passed away. And we're flying into the main airport there in just North Connecticut or whatever. And then his services are just south of there. So I'll be there Saturday and Sunday, and then I'll fly back, and then I'll turn around and fly back. And it's just a lot of stuff going on. Okay. So tonight, let's get into the content of tonight, because I will be here for a very long time if I don't get started. So we're going to jump right into comments and voicemails and all sorts of stuff. Oh, Tom G says you're Connecticut as well. There's a lot of people from Connecticut. It's a pretty small state. I think Rhode Island is the only one smaller. So a lot of people from that general area. Oh yeah. Shanti said, oh, thanks, Shanti. Thanks so much. Don't forget to hit the like button. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed. You can chat if you subscribe for more than a week. And if you want to support Turfgrass Research, please consider being a member. And Ashanti, I have your stuff queued up tonight, so I'll be going over some of your content tonight as well, as I told you on an email. Okay, let's get going here. I got so much stuff going on. It'll be a miracle if I get through this. Turfgrass Epistemology voicemail. I didn't have any voicemails that I caught, so I won't be going over any voicemails. But if you want to put your question or comment on a voicemail, you can call the show's line at 859-444-4234, and you're virtually guaranteed to have your voicemail answered on the show at some point in the future, because I don't get a whole lot of those, maybe 1 or 2 a month. And so when I do, if they're pertinent and they're not, sensitive information or something, then I'll put it on the show and answer your voicemail accordingly. Okay, let me get that up there. Okay. All right, let's get to the first comment. YouTube comments. On the video, why liquid aeration products don't work. Travis Turner, 9294, said, I had a hard-packed area that a week after a rain was still holding water. I applied 6 ounces of aerate, and 24 hours later, it had drained. I filled it up with water, and within 18 hours, it was drained again. I filled it again, and in 12 hours, it was drained. It was only 3 gallons of water, and 6 ounces was way more than normal application rate. But to me, that says there is something happening. Yeah, we want to be real careful with that, Travis Turner. That is the manner in which a lot of charlatans and con artists will convince you to end up continuing to use their product. What you're unfortunately falling victim to is a couple of fallacies. One's called the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy, and the other one is called affirming the consequent. And what the consequent is, affirming the consequent is, let me just type it in chat and then I'll put it on the screen, is if P, then Q, therefore P. And that is a very difficult flaw to acknowledge and to see past. If P occurs, then Q is going to occur. I see Q, therefore P. So the reason why that's a flaw, and I mentioned this on a prior podcast, it might have been on a members only stream, I can't remember. The reason that's a flaw is because when you observe something and previous to your observation, you made the claim, if this happens, then I will see this. And then you see this and you claim, well, therefore, that's what did it. It caused it. The reason it's a flaw is because you're not accounting for other potential sources of that observation. And I've made this response before. I've made this this analogy before. If you say, I'm going to apply nitrogen, and when I do, I'm going to see the grass turn green, then I go outside and I see green grass, and I go, oh, well, the nitrogen caused it to turn it green. Something as foundational to our industry as that analogy, which is very likely to happen. But it could have been from something else that occurred that you were unaware of, like you might have applied iron and didn't know it. You might have applied manganese and didn't know it. You might have applied phosphorus when there was a phosphorus deficiency and that was in the solution and you didn't know it. There may have been an overcast sky when it was previously measured and now it's not overcast and now it's greener because of the light. There's all sorts of other variables that can result in what you're seeing. And when you just simply go outside and say, oh, well, there it is, that must have caused it, you're discounting all the potential sources that could have caused that rather than just what you assumed it to be. That's the reason it's a flaw. So that's called the affirming the consequent. And you can also say it's the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. It's basically the same thing. Okay. So unfortunately, Travis, when you say that says there's something happening, it could be true. It very well could be that that's occurring. But when it comes to aerate, that specific product aerate, when we've gone out and we've measured as best we can, the effect of aerate on turf grasses and on soil aeration and these factors, these variables, I should say, we haven't seen any of that happen. And very soon, I'm hoping any day, I'm hoping that the paper in the Agronomy Journal will come out and we'll be able to go over it on the channel in more detail. But there's only been one study done on that I'm aware of, and it showed that nothing happened when we applied aerate. And so you may be seeing exactly what you're seeing, maybe exactly as a result of aerate. It could very well be. But until we have evidence to support something, there's no reason to believe it. There's no reason to believe an observation just because we observe. I observed a light in the sky, therefore it's an alien from another planet. Well, it could have been a satellite, could have been a shooting star, could have been a planet, could have been, who knows what it could have been. So until we have better information, better evidence, there's no reason to believe any claim, much less aerate when we have evidence to the contrary. Okay? We continue to the next comment. Does Hydretain benefit turfgrass? I had a video about Hydretain. Does it benefit turfgrass? Ruben Harris 9241 says, one of the biggest challenges with Hydretain is that no one can know what the lawn would have looked like if it was not applied. I have used it in the past and have gotten through the summer months much better than everyone in my neighborhood, but that doesn't mean that it was Hydretain that caused it. And there you go. I mean, Ruben says it more succinctly than I could. And that's what he's saying. Is like, it very well could have been that. It could have been a number of other variables. He doesn't know. Ruben doesn't know. It seemed to him that it was helping, but he's not for sure. And that's a good way to say it. So, with the case of Hydretain, that's another product that there's only been a little bit of work done on these humectants in turfgrass systems. And there doesn't seem to be any benefit to those in terms of reduced water usage, regardless of the claim on the label that says 50% water, you reduce your water use by 50%. There's no clear evidence that would actually occur. So there's no reason to believe it. Okay. By the way, I'm going to be going through the comments as they pop up, I hope, because there's so many of them. Sometimes I can't keep up with them. Oh, my wife joined. Yeah. She was a member a long time ago. Now I guess she rejoined tonight. Thank you, Lou. I can just put you as like a moderator or something, and you can still get in these chats and stuff. Anyway. Oh, Andrew Burr says, didn't aerate compact the soil more on that study? Yeah, so so thank you for reminding me, Andrew. The study that I'm speaking about on aerate, the prior comment, it actually showed that the compaction went up as a result of the aerate, not went down. Now, we're going to see what happens in the refereed paper. I hesitate to go too far down those roads in terms of being confident that that's what happened, because I was reading it from an abstract on a presentation. But when we get to the actual refereed paper, in any time now, like I said, any day or week, it should come out. Then we'll read that and see exactly what it says. But yeah, there seemed to be some evidence that aerate actually increased the compaction when they claim that it doesn't. And by the way, I got a request to go over. Well, I have it written down here. It was it was the lawn care nut. So he apparently has a new product out, and he goes over the product on his channel, and it's called compaction something. It's compaction cure, and essentially what is aerate and another product joined together. And again, there's no evidence to support it. And a lot of people here and there, not a lot of people, but here and there, I'll have comments or questions about what the show is about. And I mean, that's fine if you have your own interpretation of the show. It's perfectly fine to have that. Some people think the show is about like teaching turfgrass management or soil management or nutrient management or whatever the case is. And clearly people leave the show with more knowledge and information about how to manage their turfgrass and soils better. That's clear. That's true. But I wouldn't make that. That's not my position on the channel. The Turfgrass Epistemology channel is epistemology, knowledge. How do we know what we know? And when it comes to these products, like these new products that come out and these liquid cures of compaction and thatch or whatever, I hope the channel is imparting some sort of critical thinking skills on the audience to the point where they don't immediately say it wouldn't work. They're just not convinced that it would work because there's no evidence to indicate that it would work. And I hope that they hold firm on that. The products very well could do all this stuff. What was the previous, the Hydretain? Or no, it was what was the previous one? Oh, it was aerate. Okay. He was saying aerate did all these wonderful things. That clearly shows something happening. It very well could be, but there's no reason to believe it because there's no evidence to convince me. And that's epistemology. So I'm hoping, clearly people are getting good information to use on their lawns or golf courses and sport turf, all these things. Clearly the channel is providing information that way. But the underlying sort of foundation of the channel, I hope, is epistemology, understanding how to better equip yourself with critical thinking skills. I'm hoping that ends up being kind of the theme. That's what I'm trying to do anyway. All right, next question. A lot to go over tonight. Please stop applying potassium unless you have a good reason. That was a video or a comment I made. I can't remember. And Marcus Parado, who, I'll leave it. Never mind. Marcus Parado 6600 says, nutrients in excess oftentimes lead to disease. Here in Southwest Florida, we have sandy soils which lack in potassium. I don't see any correlation with potassium inputs increasing disease. If anything, it's the opposite. You won't pull a soil sample anywhere in this area and have adequate levels of potassium. I can say with a fair amount of confidence that that's probably true in his area. I mean, if the soils in South Florida, North Central Florida, they're generally low in potassium. That is true. But that's not what the comment was about, Marcus. And I'll just say this. If I know you, Marcus, then just shoot me an email, okay? Because I know someone named Marcus Parada. So anyway, the point is not don't apply any potassium, or the potassium is going to increase disease. That's not the point. The point is don't apply. That even says right here, please stop applying it unless you have a good reason. And in these soils that are low in potassium and are in the turfgrass maybe exhibiting potassium deficiencies, then clearly you have a good reason. Go ahead and apply some. I'm just saying this ubiquitous approach, this broadcast wide open approach to applying potassium, these 20-20-20s and 13-13-13s and these 10-2-20s and these high potassiums involved, these potassium rates and quantities are almost never warranted. When potassium is warranted, it's almost always just a little bit of potassium, not much. We're talking like a half a pound to 1 pound at max a year. That would resolve most of your potassium deficiency. Now I'm talking about anything other than USGA spec greens or California greens. Those are a little bit different. But it doesn't take much. So when you need it and you have a good reason, apply it. But his comment seems to, I'm inferring from his comment that he seems to think I'm saying potassium would increase diseases. And potassium it will increase the risk of diseases on high potassium soils or soils that are already fertile in potassium. Okay, that much is true in the literature for sure. Next comment. Soil test kits to avoid. KR5289 says, no matter which lawn video you watch, they all do it different. And since most all have nice lawns, to them, what they do works for them. See, that's another flaw. I love watching. I mean, if you post a negative comment, this isn't a hateful comment, just sort of like a snidey little rude comment, I am almost guaranteed to put it on my show because I have yet to come across one that is not ripe with flaws and fallacies. They're great. They're fantastic. So you're saying, here, let me read it again and see if anybody can catch it. Basically what he's saying is all these people do it different. They all have nice lawns. So what they're doing works. So let me give you an analogy. Let me give you a situation. You have a lawn. You're applying nitrogen at adequate but not excessive levels, so optimum levels of nitrogen. You're mowing the lawn and optimum levels, optimum sharpening your blades, all timing, height, all these things are adequate and ideal. You're applying phosphorus or potassium according to best management practices. Everything's great. There's nothing that you're doing that you would be thought of as against the best management practice. You're doing those correct. NPK, mowing your lawn, watering the lawn well, lights, everything's good, and lawns are looking good. You happen to also be going out and praying to Vishnu that your lawn will look good, and you're praying to Allah, you're praying to Yahweh, and you're praying to Wotan and Thor, and you're doing all that as well. You're doing a rain dance on top of your lawn. And you're having all sorts of spices and aromas and therapy out there, and all that's resulting in what you deem to be a healthy lawn. Do you see the problem with that statement now? That's the composition division fallacy. Just because you're doing it in tandem or in groups with other things doesn't mean that what you're doing is resulting in some sort of beneficial response. Okay? Just because it looks good and it's acceptable doesn't mean that what you're doing is actually working. Praying to Thor, praying to Allah, and praying to Wotan, and let's say you were out there praying to Lucius Greaves from the Satanic Temple. I mean, which one of them is correct? Which one of them is actually resulting in your green lawn? They all can't be correct. So something's clearly not working. I mean, they're not all doing something. So the point is, this is a very easy flaw to fall into as well, just like the post hoc flaw. It's not easy to, divorce yourself from these errant ways of thinking. Well, everything I'm doing is resulting in a lawn that's acceptable to me, so everything I'm doing is working. That's the composition division fallacy. So be careful with that, KR5289. It's a very easy flaw to fall into, and it's not an easy one to get out of. Let me go back to the chat. I said I was going to go through this. Oh, see, I'll put my wife's comment on there. Hi all. She was a member before, but had to renew it. It prompted me now. I'm super supportive, of course. Yeah, everybody, all the members know. And all the people who listen know. This channel doesn't exist without my wife. It might exist now because the members are really, really supportive, and a lot of the revenue from the channel really, it's almost self-sustainable at this point. But none of this would have happened without her. So, what else? Was there any other comments? Eric Lickness says, Wotan is way better for my lawn. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Wotan's better. Well, I'm praying to Lucian Greaves, so he's better. I mean, the point is, something you're doing is very likely resulting in your acceptable lawn. It wouldn't probably be acceptable if it was just laid in a natural state and not maintained anyway. So clearly something's working. But what exactly it is another matter. Okay. John Comer, no more praying to false gods. Maybe I shouldn't have brought up the religion stuff. Okay, let's go to the next comment. Here we go. BS is his business, and business is good. I think that was the John, what was that? John, whatever that guy's name is from Lawncology. Can't remember. I did a video on him. And Josiah Thornton says, it's so hard to find truth in our industry. We as turf managers, we want to do what is right for our customers and make an honest living, but these charlatans make it hard. Yeah, it does. And I put that up there because I have interacted with many sod producers, sport turf, lawn care, golf on grassroots level, pardon the pun, as well as political levels, very high level academic levels. And I have yet to come across one who is in the industry and really active. I have yet to come across one that doesn't try to do the right thing. Most of them are trying to do the right thing. They're trying to follow the rules. They're trying to follow the laws. They're trying to follow best management practices. They're trying to stay green industry certified. They're doing the right thing. And so I saw Josiah Thornton put that comment up, and I was like, yeah, I have yet to come across one that says, screw the BMPs. I'm just going to go out there and put 40 pounds of nitrogen out there and, grow it like heck. I mean, I don't come across that. Maybe they exist, but it's rare. So I think that's the reason I like the industry as much as I do is that we do have the charlatans in the industry, as Josiah says. We do have the people trying to sell you a bunch of, seer stones and all sorts of crazy stuff. That's true. I mean, all these crazy things that come up, they're trying to find a niche in the market to get you to spend money with them rather than their competitors. I get that. That's going to be one of the results of a capitalistic society where it's just the reality we're in. But what we do is we try to equip ourselves and arm ourselves with the best evidence we can. And then that's why we're here. So thanks for that comment, Josiah. Next comment. Ninos Yukana. I can't remember how to pronounce your last name, Ninos. It says, do we need to be concerned about soil texture? If so, is there a place to send a sample for the soil texture test? That is a very good question. Okay. Got to do something real quick over here on this other screen. That's a very good question, Ninos. And the way I'm going to answer that question is by putting up a soil test. And this is just one of many types of soil tests that you can come across. This particular test is from Texas A&M, which I'm going to go over this test a little bit later in the show tonight as well on a different issue. But this particular test has the normal analysis that you'd come across in phosphorus and potassium and so forth. But down at the bottom, this particular homeowner apparently asked for a textural analysis. And down here, you'll see sand, silt, and clay and the textural class clay. And here you'll see the method hydrometer. That would be my preferred method, would be the hydrometer method. There's several different ways to measure soil texture. Hydrometer is the pretty much the gold standard. It's a little bit monotonous and slow, but that's a good way to do it. Okay. So here we have 33% sand, 19% silt, and 48% clay. Huge clay. That is crazy high clay, and its textural class is clay. That is high. Okay. That is going to be a very challenging soil to grow. Well, you can grow grass in it, but to maintain the water and the hydrology and the physics of that soil are going to be challenging to work with. Not the nutrient content per se, but the physics are going to be a challenge. So the answer to your question, Ninos, is yes. You'll have to ask for a soil texture test. Texas A&M does it. There's many other soil labs that do it. I don't. Maybe majority do it. I'm not sure, but a lot of soil labs do it. You can also get a rough idea, although I don't particularly recommend it for everybody. You can get a rough idea by going to the USDA soil survey maps, but those are more for like sod producers or maybe golf courses that haven't had a lot of soil disruption going on. In other words, they haven't built a house on top of it and dumped a bunch of junk on top of it, or they haven't built a football field in different types of systems that have, it's in other words, a native soil. It's only going to give you what the native soil would be. You can kind of get a rough idea from the USDA soil survey maps, but otherwise, yes, Texas A&M is one lab. I'm sure Waters probably does it, and A&L probably does it. You just have to go on their website and ask for that specific test to be done. And don't expect to pay the same as you do for a normal, like a nutrient analysis test. It's going to be probably more expensive. Okay. Next question. Will organic fertilizer change soil properties on sport turf? I did a video on that. Magnus Barth 6671 says, what we have noticed is far less disease on our golf greens in late summer, fall using organic nitrogen instead of inorganic nitrogen. So that's fine, Magnus. If you've noticed you have far less disease, that's fine. If I can show you 10 other emails from people who say we have far more disease, what do we do? You have one observation, one person saying, well, we use it and we have less disease. And other people say they use it and they have more disease. These are all critical components of the soil of the scientific method. They're the observation. That's the observation. That's what you made. Do not make best management practices or management decisions on an observation. That's the beginning of the scientific process. It's at the end when the conclusions, and we can draw conclusions and build best management practices off the results and conclusions where we want to go. Okay. So I'm not saying you didn't see that. I'm not saying that the people who say the exact opposite didn't see what they saw. I'm saying that when you have two different conflicting observations, that's a good opportunity to build a study and see what it says. See where the results go. Okay. But making conclusions off of observations is the affirming the consequence. And we want to be careful with that you can really fall victim to some misinformation and disinformation real fast using that method. Next question. On Tenfold Turfgrass number 3, the best cheerleader for selling lawn products you don't need. Alex K. Star 2025 says, what are you rambling on about logical fallacies when discussing quick release fertilizers? You put it down, and if it had iron in 2 or 3 days, you see massive differences in appearance. Talk about overthinking. It's nutrients in water, and you can repeat it a bunch of times easily. I love that. If you put down liquid iron, you're going to see that. That's true. But if you put down granular iron, you're not going to see anything. But the content is easily mistaken for like turf and soil content. I like to, I don't know. It clearly I'm using turf and soils as my means to an end. But the end is critical thinking skills and epistemology. How do you know? So whenever someone makes a claim, and in their claim, the claim itself is flawed, there's a fallacy in it, then there's no reason to believe it from the get-go. It might be correct, but because it's flawed in structure or in content, just disregard it and move on. Okay, keep going. Why soil pH is important. I had a video on that. Paul something 8481 says, how do you recommend me raising my pH? Don't fault this guy's language. I think he might be from a different country, and he speaks English a lot better than I speak his language. He says, how do you recommend me raising my pH from 5.5 to 6.5 or 7? And my reply back to him was, why do you want to raise your soil pH? And what he said basically was he wanted to switch it for some alfalfa or something. It sounded like he was a farmer and wanted to raise some soil pH. So what I would say is I'm not an alfalfa specialist. I don't know what pH alfalfa grows best in. I have no clue. But I suspect, based upon your soil, you might see a benefit from liming the soil at 5.5, but I don't know your soil. If you don't have any aluminum or iron or manganese in there, then probably liming is not going to do anything. You're not probably experiencing any toxicities or any problems with those elements at 5.5 full stop, but definitely not at 5.5 if you don't have them in the soil to begin with. So you would want to look up your land-grant institution to see what pH they recommend for alfalfa and that pH. But if you're going to raise your pH, if that's something you think you're going to increase your yields by doing, first of all, have a good reason to do it. Don't just do it because, oh, it's 5.5, I got to raise it to 6.5. Do it because alfalfa grows better at 6.5 than at 5.5, or yields are, whatever, several tons more an acre than at 6.5 than at 5.5. Have some good reason for it, okay? But if you're going to, it's just lime. You could use dolomite or you could use calcium carbonate. Either one of those is going to raise it. The amount you want to apply, that's one of the factors or one of the variables on a soil test that you can have a great deal of confidence in, is the liming requirement and the amount of lime needed to increase pH. Because those tests are pretty much plant independent. It's the soil itself, whether it's buffered to a certain pH or whatever the case is. The lab's going to have pretty good confidence on knowing how much lime you need to apply in order to move the pH up and so forth. So I would base my lime application on the soil test in that particular example. Okay. So Joe Callis says, speaking of, say you have really high aluminum, at what pH do we get concerned about toxicity? I would want to refer back to McBride's book on that, Joe, before I gave you an answer on that. I could probably find it in a few minutes, but I'll probably bore the audience to tears. I will say, with iron, you asked for aluminum, I know. With iron, we really don't get appreciable amounts of iron move into soil solution, remain soluble in soil solution, I should say, until we get below 4. We're talking low. Okay, so I don't know what that would be with aluminum, but I would still suspect it would be in the 4s or below before you really started to see some toxicity with aluminum. There is a photo of some centipede grass grown in Alabama at a pH of, I think it was 5, or was it 4? I can't remember. Ah, man, I should have had that pulled up. Where it clearly wasn't looking good. And that very well could have been an iron or aluminum toxicity. And they moved it up 1 pH unit and the turf grass recovered fine. So I wish I knew which pH that was now. Do I have that handy somewhere? Let me see. I think I have that handy. Let me pull it up since you asked and since you're a member. Let me I think I happen to have that right. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick and not crash my computer completely out here. I know if I have it, it's going to be right in. It's not that one. Let me open up this one. I think I copy and pasted it into this presentation. I was just working on this today. Yeah, okay, good. Well, it's right here. Son of a gun. Okay, let me put this on the screen. And I think I can do this without killing the whole system here. This is, and it was 4, pH of 4. So this was in Auburn, Alabama, and this is centipede grass growing at a pH of 4. And the idea is centipede grass grows well at low pHs, so we don't ever lime. Don't ever lime centipede grass. Never lime it. That's what you hear all the time. Don't ever lime centipede grass. It grows well at low pH as well. Here, a pH of 4, it was basically dead. You move it up to pH of 5, and it's the same as 6 and so forth. It's fine. So this is from Dr. Gertall. So whether that's an aluminum toxicity or an iron toxicity or manganese toxicity, I don't know, Joe. Okay, I'm not sure. But I would suspect that the issue wouldn't really come up until you got well up into well down into the fours, would be my take on that. Okay. Where was I at? Let me go to the next question. I'll come back to some of these other ones. Okay. Next question. Or did I finish that question completely? Yeah, okay. Next question. Will organic fertilizer change soil properties on sport turf? At AEAC, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that particular YouTuber is an air rifle YouTuber. And if he is, I wouldn't mind you giving me an email, because I have a Viroc that might need some help with. But anyway, off the subject. Anyway, he says, the year I've spent here listening to you and Matt at the Grass Factor has translated into huge money savings and huge response out of my Empire Zoysia turf. Compared to the previous 3 years, I've been listening to the fibbers, lawn care nut, lawncology, etc. Thank you, Doctor. Steve from Tampa. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said on a previous podcast, is like I have a certain approach that's going to speak to people, and it's not going to speak to other people. And the guys at the Grass Factor, Matt, Ray, and got caught off guard. I have a brain freeze here. Ryan, they have a different approach than I do. And so does Dr. Woods at Asian Turfgrass. He has a different approach. And the people that I influence, who listen and like the way I deliver the information, great. They listen to me. Maybe they listen to both, but maybe there's some people that don't like the way I do it. Yeah, they would probably be more entertained by the guys at the Grass Factor. So wherever you get the information from, just do your best to vet it properly and use the literature, use the information in the literature, because I speak live on this. There's no script and I may misspeak. And so use the literature as the foundation of your best management practices. And I do my best to communicate the literature on the show. I know a lot of people say, well, I don't know where to go find it. That's the reason I go over literature on the show. But just because the guys at the Grass Factor say it, or just because Dr. Wood says it or whatever, doesn't mean it's true. So get the information, but then do your best to go look it up and see if there's any literature to support it, or read it on your own and critically think your way through it. But doing it just because Dr. Shaddox said it, or because Matt said it, or because Dr. Wood said it, that's an appeal to authority. That's a known fallacy. So please don't do that. I do my best to communicate the evidence and the truth as best I know it, but I can be wrong. So the literature can be wrong too, as I've mentioned, but the chances are much less that the literature would be wrong than me. So thank you for your comment, AEAC. And I'm serious about the Viroc. So give me an email. I need some help. Okay. All right. Next one. Soil pH has a little influence on malic 3 potassium. Shunya0101 says, looking at a soil test, how do we know what are extractable nutrients for the plant and what are not? And I get this question a lot, and I get the question usually worded a little bit different. It's usually worded, how do I know which nutrients are plant available? And this one, he says, how do we know what are extractable nutrients and which are not? Okay, I think what he means is available, because he says extractable nutrients for the plant. So I think he means available for the plant, but I'll answer it both ways. Every nutrient on a soil test, on a traditional soil test like Malic or Bray or Olson or whatever the case is, ammonium acetate or DTPA or whatever the case is, every nutrient is an extractable nutrient. Okay, there's a portion of that extractable nutrient that was soluble in the soil solution. Okay, so it's going to extract everything that was in the soil solution plus a portion that was either in a mineral form or on the organic matter or on an exchange site somewhere else in the soil that wasn't in the soil solution. It's going to extract a portion of that. So all nutrients are extractable, okay, on a soil test. That's the reason we say Malic 3 extractable phosphorus or Malic 3 extractable potassium. We don't ever say plant available potassium. That's a huge no-no in soil testing, because I can't tell you what is plant available. The soil test itself is an index, essentially. It's taking a portion of soil, it's extracting a portion of nutrients out of the soil, what was soluble, and a little bit that was extractable in different forms, whatever they came from. And then we're trying to correlate that quantity with a plant response. Did that quantity in the soil support adequate plant growth, or did it not? Did that quantity in the soil, accompanied with applications of that element, result in increased growth than without applying the element? Those sorts of correlations are what a soil test is designed to do. And we're trying to provide confidence in the end user to let them know you are probably going to see a plant response to applying, let's just use potassium. You're going to see a plant response to applying potassium because we've extracted this quantity. And when we've extracted that quantity and we've applied potassium on top of it, we've seen a plant response. But when we extracted this quantity, which is more, and we applied potassium, we didn't see a plant response. That's in a nutshell what soil testing is all about. But nowhere in there are we ever trying to determine what nutrients are plant available. It is an index, if you want to call it that, of what is predicted to be available over time over the growing season, or is the soil going to provide sufficient nutrients over that growing season to support an acceptable plant growth? Okay, all that is true. But to say Mehlich 3 potassium was 50, and that means there's 50 parts per million of plant available potassium, that's not true. If I've ever said that on the channel, then I was wrong. I misspoke, and hopefully I've never said that. So if you hear things online or you're reading things and they say plant available, that maybe they just speak without thinking through it enough, or they just didn't know they said available or whatever. That's possible, especially when you're live. But there's no ability to determine what's plant available in a soil test that's using an acid extractant or a caustic extractant at all. Okay. That's the reason I don't have a whole lot of confidence on some of these numbers, because in order to get that confidence, it takes a lot of time and a lot of research and a lot of money to figure out, well, was this much enough? Was this much Mehlich 3 potassium enough? Did I need less? And that's the reason you can't do all these. You go out and do, I'm just finishing up the sulfur paper. You can't go out and just do a soil test correlation on any soil, because you're not going to see a response on soils that already have adequate potassium. You're going to go out and do all that work and nothing's going to happen. You're going to have an R squared of like 0.01 and a p-value of 0.9. I mean, there's nothing going to happen because the plant's not going to respond to it. It's like taking medication for a disease that you don't have. You're not going to see a response to that. So it's very challenging. You have to find the right soil that's low enough in that nutrient so that when you go out and throw a study on it, you see a response to it. Then you can do a correlation and even a calibration. Sorry, nerd speak. I'll get back on the fun stuff. Sorry, guys. All right, next one. Members only show, link from Monday, February. Ibrahim Deron 776 says, I listened to the podcast on microorganisms. Is there any paper on the effect of microorganisms on saline conditions? Yes, there is. I'm not a soil microbiologist, and I'm not a saline soil specialist, so I'm not well versed in that literature. But I have heard people talk at scientific talks about saline soils and the microbial activity that occurs or doesn't occur in saline soils. So it does exist. I suppose I can go into that if you want me to, but I can't just speak off the top of my head because I don't know that literature that well, but I'm almost for certain, yes, it does exist. Next comment, granular versus liquid programs for turfgrass at Mundo Tezo says, this guy needs to take Joe Williams' nitrogen efficiency course. Trace minerals are essential for nitrogen efficiency. It's way cheaper than over-applying nitrogen with low efficiency. There's a conflation of the argument there. That's it's not really an equivocation fallacy. What he's saying is, well, trace minerals are essential. And this one is saying, I'm saying granular versus liquid programs, a video I put out, saying that these micronutrients don't really show a response, aren't really that useful. But yet he's saying trace minerals are essential. This is kind of a straw man, really. Yes, trace minerals are essential. No one's saying they're not. They wouldn't be called trace minerals if they weren't essential. They're plant essential elements. The point of the video was the soil already provides all those minerals in almost every case at adequate levels. Okay, these micronutrients that you're applying. By the way, you're applying them with a macronutrient, sulfates, and you're wondering, well, I see a response. Yeah, I don't doubt you see a response, especially if you're applying iron in there or you're applying sulfate in there. You're applying zinc and boron and all these other micronutrients thinking you're having a turfgrass response to that. That's wishful thinking. Okay, so yes, trace minerals are essential. Yes, for nitrogen deficient, they're essential. But the application of those trace minerals is what I'm talking about. That's what I care about because that's what people are buying and applying. And the application of those trace minerals only in the rarest of circumstances would be worth the money. Very, very strange and rare conditions would warrant the application of that and would offset the cost of spending money to apply those micronutrients. With the exception of iron and manganese, obviously I've mentioned that before. And then of course it comes with sulfate, which is a macronutrient. That's a separate issue as well. Next question. How do we measure soil health? Mundo, the same guy. Is that the same guy? No, same guy. Mundo Tezo says, you should talk to more agronomists. The databases that any lab or agronomists are not public. The Haney test is more of a mix of a paste test and a Solvita test for respiration level. Talk to folks at Logan Lab. If you have correlation in between Malic 3, paste, and Solvita and tissue, you can make correlation from action. I don't know. Maybe he's has a foreign language too. I don't know. I think only large farmers use all those together. Do you know turf professionals that measure throughout the year and build their amendment program off of it? All I see turf managers do is over-fertilize and make nitrate pollution. That's all you ever see them do. That's all you ever see them do is over-fertilize and make nitrate pollution. I actually could make an argument for the over-fertilization part. I might not argue with that. That's probably the case in many cases. That make nitrate pollution, have you measured that? I haven't gone into the Haney test or the paste test much or the Solvita test. But the Haney test I'll be going over when I come back from this kind of on and off break I'm having. The Haney test is not well correlated with turfgrass response. And some of the other tests aren't well correlated with turfgrass response, to be honest. The paste test is completely useless. It's a fraud except for pH and for salinity and for some sodium issues. But it's what people will use, what con artists will use to convince you to buy products. So it's useless. The Solvita test, it's also very, very poorly correlated. And I'm going to go over a paper on that in probably the next Tuesday night on this carbon burst technology and the carbon burst respiration and its ability to predict what you'll need in the soil. It's not well correlated either. And tissues are unbelievably poorly correlated with turfgrass response, tissue analysis. So everything you're mentioning on here, with the exception of Malic 3 there, Mundo, maybe you're talking to the wrong agronomists. I don't know. But this is indoctrination through and through, with the exception of Malic 3. You shouldn't be using paste for nutrient, Solvita for nutrient, or tissue for nutrient at all. Okay? So thanks for the comment. All right, next one. Tenfold Turfgrass number 2, soil compaction has a new liquid cure. My 4748 says, last year I purchased all their bioproducts. This was on the compaction cure product, and it was from help me out with those companies, guys. I always forget the name of those dang companies. Green County Fertilizer. And I don't know if it was from Yard Mastery or what, but that's what the Tenfold Turfgrass was about. And this guy says, my 4748 says, last year I purchased all their bio products. I did not see any difference on my lawn. The only thing different was the money and wasted time spent on applying the products. Yes. It's very rare that you're ever going to see a company who sells only wasteful products. I mean, they have a portfolio of products. If some of them have nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and iron in them, there's going to be some products in there that are useful. There's no question. But these bioproducts and these humic acids and all these other products, you go out there and put them out, and they're going to aerate the soil and do all these magical things. That's pretty rare that you would ever see a benefit to that. Certainly to the point where it would warrant offsetting the cost of the product. Next question. Turfgrass YouTuber breaks the law. Oh, yeah, this was on the Lawn Care Nut. This video I did was on the Lawn Care Nut. Mr. Barbecue says, this is the type of person that lives to post and comment on Nextdoor. He's talking about me. I did a video. The Lawn Care Nut was breaking the law and applying phosphorus to his lawn. in a county that you can't apply phosphorus to in Florida. He's saying that I'm the type of person who would post on Nextdoor. One, I don't even know what Nextdoor is. I had to go look it up. And I think it's like a website that like has like community comments, what's going on, whatever. It's a little bit, you kind of have to understand my perspective. My perspective is I've spent almost my entire professional career developing best management practices for people to follow best management practices and to apply nutrients correctly and to grow turfgrass in an environment without unnecessarily altering the environmental risk or consequences because we're under the gun. In other words, I'm trying to help our industry because we're under attack from a lot of different people, whether it's politicians or environment or whatever the case is, because they think we're doing all these bad things. They think we're going out and we're polluting the environment, when in reality, we're really not. As long as you're following best management practices, it's not easy to increase nitrogen or phosphorus levels beyond background levels, as long as you're following BMPs. But when you have one of the world's biggest YouTube lawn care channels going out and showing people to break the law, to violate best management practices, I get a little upset. Yeah, that's exactly what happens, because I spent my entire career trying to teach people how not to do that. And one YouTuber goes out and posts one video and influences thousands and thousands of people contrary to best management practices. So yeah, I wouldn't post anything on Nextdoor. I didn't even know it existed, but I will put a video on my channel about it. Thank you, Mr. Barbecue. Next video, tinfoil turfgrass number 2, soil compaction has a new liquid cure. Curtis Lee Letty 1408 says, I would love to see these YouTubers' reaction to your video. Yeah, I would actually like to see that too. Yeah, I would like to see that. I get a kick out of that. I actually did show, who was it? It was, Joel Simmons from Earthworks. He and his chemist or somebody was talking about me and how hateful I am and whatever. And so I put that on the channel. I loved that. It's fantastic. And all their comments and all their criticisms of my position were every one of them flawed. And I pointed out every single one of them. And it's really easy, guys. All you have to do to convince me is produce evidence. And it doesn't come on YouTube. It just comes in a refereed paper. Just publish a refereed paper and I'll go and read it. It's not complicated. It's very easy. Next comment. Getting to the emails. Okay, this is where I'm going to try to move quick because I'm just being frank. We're going to be here for a little bit longer, guys. So just if you're watching this or listening to this, we have a little bit more to go to. It says, "Hi, Dr. Shaddox. Very, very long email on this one. And he was on here earlier. He's welcome to speak up if he likes. But I told him I'd go over this on the show. So here's the first email. He is a member, so I'm including his email. He had a little background on what's going on in his location, and then he gets to the end of his email and he says this. Fast forward to February 2025, I sent off new soil samples to Texas A&M to ensure I had fixed the phosphorus deficiency that was in his lawn. I don't want a repeat of 2024. To my surprise, I retained a phosphorus, albeit improved, deficiency, and now my potassium rates have increased despite not applying any since 2024. So what he's saying is he did still have phosphorus deficiency, although it was improved, but now he has potassium increasing for some reason. I'm not sure what's going on there. Do you have any videos, preferred, or articles that discuss the makeup of triple superphosphate? Is it possible to increase potassium in the soil from triple superphosphate or ammonium sulfate? Should I do another app of phosphorus after green up or wait and see? Is there a product or active ingredient you recommend for a phosphorus deficiency that won't jack up my potassium at the same time? P.S. I'm not a fan of smell of organics, so I prefer to use synthetics. That's fine. One, the likelihood that concentrated superphosphate is increasing your potassium is almost zero. So, in some bizarre case, I suppose it could, but because concentrated superphosphate might have a slight acidifying effect initially when it's applied right around the prill, but the application of ammonium sulfate will reduce pH. However, actually, I had that already pulled up. Maybe it's still up. Did I close that? I already had that up, so let me just pull it back up. The reduction in acidity, okay, as a result of the ammonium sulfate. Let me see if I can get to that particular slide. The reduction of acidity will increase, very likely, the solubility of potassium in the soil, okay? That, to a certain degree, that can happen, okay? However, when it comes to, this is probably really going to break the system here, guys. When it comes to, we got it. When it comes to the effect of soil pH on Mehlich 3 extractable potassium. I've shown this before, and this is what the fake, pH graph thing will say. It says potassium is going to be completely flat from 6 to 10 and then go down from 6 to 4 in terms of solubility. But when we actually measure the Mehlich 3 potassium, what happens between, say, pH of 4 and pH of 8 is essentially nothing. Agronomically speaking, this is as straight a line as you can come up with. Now, each one of these dots, this is from soil testing in Kentucky over the last 20 or 30 years. Each one of these dots here represents about 10,000 to 50,000 soil samples. Let me see how do I get, oh, dang it, I'm going to mess it up. Hang on. PowerPoint, how do I get this? I need to learn how to do this stuff. Oh, here we go. Pin. Okay, now we come back on. Oops. Potassium. Each one of these dots here represents about 50,000 points, 10,000 to 50,000 soil samples over the last 20, 30 years. And it's just flat. It's just as flat as can be. And once you get up here above 8, when calcium starts precipitating out, you have some funky things happen. And I wouldn't worry about that because this is a very, very small minority of samples above 8.5 or so. So, to the person who sent the email, if you applied ammonium sulfate, solubility of potassium is probably going to go up, but you're not going to be able to detect that probably on a Mehlich 3 soil test. Your Mehlich 3 soil test is probably going to be as flat as it can be. I mean, you might be that one out of a million that sees it go up or something, but it's probably going to be flat. So the application of concentrated superphosphate or the application of ammonium sulfate is probably not going to alter the potassium that much. If it might move it up a little if the pH goes down a little bit. It might move it up a little, but not much. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. But let's look at some of your soil samples here and see exactly what he's talking about. Here's the soil sample that he's referring to. And on this soil sample, this is from Texas A&M, and he's talking about his phosphorus in 2024 was 9. Okay. This is low enough to warrant the application of phosphorus. There's no question. I believe Texas A&M uses Mehlich 3. Okay, his potassium was 237 parts per million. I believe this is in parts per million. Is this in parts per million? Yeah. Okay, here it is. Units parts per million. Okay. So indeed, his phosphorus was low. And his potassium was 237. Well, when he goes the next year, his phosphorus went to 20, and his potassium went to 420. And he's concerned his potassium is going up too high. I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. I don't know why it's going up. I have no idea, but I wouldn't be alarmed about it at all. I would just keep doing what you're doing. Don't worry about it. With at least with regards to potassium, you're probably fine. If you're overly worried about it because you think potassium may end up increasing the risk of disease or something like that, or risk of some problem, that's true. It could happen. But if you're not applying any potassium in any of the products, I don't know of any reason to believe that's what you're doing is causing it to go up. It could just be some fluke thing. Who knows? Okay. So when you go to this other section of his lawn that says the hill, his phosphorus was 12, again low, and his potassium was 527, and phosphorus is now 12, and his potassium is 2. This is the same year? Oh no, this is backwards. No. Okay, so this is the hill. His phosphorus was 8. Sorry, I'm backwards here. His phosphorus was 8 and his potassium was 286. And then the next year his phosphorus is 12 and 527. So it's going up in the backyard as well, or his hill. And then he had another test on here where his backyard was, or his lawn was 12 the first year, and now it's 21 with phosphorus. And the first year was 272, and now it's 499 with potassium. So it's going up in both all his locations, potassium. But your phosphorus is going up as well. Okay, so I don't know why potassium is going up. There's no reason to believe concentrated superphosphate and ammonium sulfate is going to do that much to it. Suppose it could, but I wouldn't worry about it a whole lot. If you're worried about it too much, then just go out and use some urea. Your pH is 7.7 in the mid 7s, so I would stay with ammonium sulfate if I were you. I wouldn't be overly worried about potassium. I would just keep doing the concentrated superphosphate. Or you could go out there with diammonium phosphate, but diammonium phosphate is extremely hot. You will burn grass with diammonium phosphate and monoammonium phosphate quicker than any other granular fertilizer, including ammonium sulfate. So just stay with ammonium sulfate. You're fine. Now, what I wanted to point out though was that this particular gentleman also included he had his front yard before and after, and he also had a my soil test pulled on this as well. And I mentioned before, we need to stop comparing these tests because this test is completely fraudulent. There's nothing about this test other than maybe nitrate on some cool season grasses you potentially could use. But notice in his front yard, front yard right here, front yard, 2024, where is it at? 2024 right here. His potassium is 237 parts per million. To give you guys an idea what the critical limit is, it's probably somewhere around 50 parts per million. Okay, so he's 4 to 5 times greater than the critical limit. He's never going to need potassium for a very, very long time in that lawn. So, and it says right here, high. In this particular test, it's correct, and they do diagnose this as being high potassium. But look what happens in the my soil. Potassium, they denote, or they identify or interpret as being low, very low. And this is exactly how fraudulent soil test interpretations are used to sell you product you don't need. There is no reason, no good reason to apply potassium to this yard at all. You can see it right here at 237 parts per million. The next year it was 420 parts per million. And here it is on my soil saying it's low, and you got to apply a 12-12-12 or 5-5-5 organic. This happens day in and day out, guys and gals. This test is fraudulent. Stop using it. Stop buying stuff from companies that use this test. There is no good reason, no evidence to support these interpretations at all. The best thing we can do is just ignore it, stop spending our money on it, and hope these guys go somewhere else. Okay? So that's my answer to you. Let me go to, I had some pictures of his lawn, and you can see before and after. It looked pretty rough before, and you can see the progress. It's looking better now. I wouldn't attribute all that to phosphorus. Nature rarely lets us get that close to its mysteries, knowing it was phosphorus and that cured it. I mean, it's usually more than one thing going on. Water, light, temperature, these things, I would make sure they're at optimum levels first. But clearly phosphorus was at a limit where I would definitely apply some phosphorus when you're in single digits phosphorus, there's an extremely good chance you're deficient in phosphorus. So I would go ahead and apply some as you did. And I would continue to apply some until I saw the deficiency wane and be alleviated. And then don't apply anymore. It's not going to go anywhere. The phosphorus is going to stay around for a long time. So as soon as you see the deficiency be alleviated in the turf grass, or if you get above like 20 or 30 parts per million in the soil, then I would stop applying phosphorus and just rely heavily upon just the nitrogen alone. That would be my approach on that. I like emails like that because it gives me a chance to explain in real practical opportunities to explain this is what real people deal with. And they see the phosphorus numbers going up. They see their lawn improving. They see the potassium numbers going up. They're worried about it. Well, don't worry about the potassium so much. I would still continue to apply some phosphorus. I would, even at 20 parts per million phosphorus, I would probably still apply a little bit, even if it's just a maintenance level, very, very low levels. You don't need to go out there with 2 or 3 pounds of phosphorus, half a pound at the most of the year. Follow Texas laws if they have whatever laws they have there. That's what I would do. Yeah, okay, yeah. So Shawnee, I didn't know if you felt comfortable. So that was a Shawnee's email. He says, spoiler alert, that's me. Appreciate you taking the time, Dr. Shaddox. Yeah, of course. Eric Linkness says, my fraudulent soil test versus the state university. That's an eye opener. Yeah, my soil test should be my fraudulent soil test. Good one. Okay, next one. Still got a lot to get to, guys. Hello. Long time since my last email, but can you input in some of the future episode? By the way, this I don't want to hear anything about the guy's language because this is a English second language, and as you know, my family speaks a second language, and this particular gentleman speaks English many times better than I speak his language. So we're good with the language. Long time since my last email, but can you input in some of the future episodes an explanation to the public how much of an element from the fertilizer is enough to be applied to bring 1 part per million into the soil, please? I know the answer, but I think that the majority don't know the scale. Something like the relationship between a 2D in the top area and a 3D in the soil slice volume. For example, if one needs to increase sulfur by 10 parts per million in a 4-inch soil layer, how much ammonium sulfate is enough to do that in practice, and so for the other elements? Thank you for all your work. And it says BR. Okay. And I believe he's a member, or he was a member. I can't remember. I get this question a lot. How much of this nutrient do I need to apply in order to increase the soil, say, let's just say potassium, or he used sulfate. Did he use sulfate? Sulfate. So how much sulfate do I need to apply? Let's say my sulfur is 5 parts per million, and I want to increase it to 10 parts per million. How much do I need to apply? Give me 1 second. I got to take a drink. Hang on. My voice can only talk for so long here. I would be extremely careful following that basic concept. Okay. I have 5 parts per million. I want to increase it to 10 parts per million. So I'm going to apply X amount of product. And the reason for that is it doesn't account for losses of that product, either leaching or in the air or binding of that product in the soil. And it doesn't account for additions or removal of unknown sources of that element in the soil already. So let's just say I'm 5 parts per million sulfate sulfur. Let's say I want to apply 5 parts per million sulfate sulfur. Well, what percentage of that 5 parts per million that I'm going to add is actually going to be included on the next test? Particular sulfate. It can gas off, it can leach through, it can convert to different forms. It can be converted by microbes. There's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of fates of these elements, both they can be added into the system or they can be removed from the system. So first of all, I wouldn't do it that way. I'm 30 parts per million potassium and I need to be at 50, so I need to increase it by 20. That is potentially a very flawed and expensive approach because of the reasons I stated. But primarily, of the reasons I say, but secondarily, that is a feeding the soil approach. And we don't want to feed the soil. You're looking at moving numbers up. You're chasing numbers and adding nutrients in the soil to increase the numbers. We want to feed the plant, not the soil. So having said that, I'm going to explain this acre furrow slice business real quick so people can follow the logic behind this conversion. But I wouldn't take this and go, okay, I need to apply 100 pounds per acre of potassium to increase it by X number of parts per million. I wouldn't do that. Okay. I would know I need to apply this much element regularly to result in a turfgrass response, not to increase the soil numbers. Okay. We continue. So here we go. This is the way I'm going to explain it here, if I can get this back on the screen. So on the screen, I have a 3-dimensional sphere, or not a sphere, but a slice of like a cake, basically. And I have written on here, it says, this is an example of an acre furrow slice, which is 43,560 square feet, 6 inches deep, and it weighs 2 million pounds. That is a massive assumption. If you're outside the United States, it would be a hectare furrow slice, which is the same equivalent but it'd be in kilograms. So it'd be 2 million kilograms rather than 2 million pounds. Okay. And it'd be on a hectare rather than an acre. So you can do the same conversion. But I have almost never come across a soil that an acre furrow slice weighs 2 million pounds. Organic soils are going to weigh less. Clay soils are going to weigh more. Sandy soils are going to weigh less. So this is an assumption that an acre furrow slice, which is 6 inches, which is the depth of a typical plow. So that plow layer essentially weighs 2 million pounds. So it's a massive assumption, but fair enough. We have to make some assumptions if we're going to provide some recommendations in this regard. So because this acre furrow slice weighs 2 million pounds, 1 part per million will equal 2 pounds per acre at 6 inches of depth. And the reason for that is because the 6-inch depth weighs 2 million pounds, not 1 million pounds. If you did it at 3 inches, 1 part per million would be 1 pound per acre at 3 inches, because at 3-inch depth, it would weigh 1 million pounds. So 1 pound to 1 million pounds is 1 part per million at 3 inches. So that's the simplicity behind it. So that's how you would know how much you would need to apply based on that. And that, if you're going to do it that way, which I would not do, that's how we can convert soil tests from pounds per acre to parts per million, which again, you got to be real careful doing that. But again, that's the reason why you have to know the soil sample depth. If you take a soil sample depth at 3 inches and the lab thought you took it at 6 inches, and they go, okay, well, you took a soil sample at 3 inches and your parts per million were 20, so you have 40 pounds per acre, because they thought you took it at 6 inches rather than 1 inch. 6 inches rather than 3 inches, and they're totally off. You have to know what the depth was that you took it in. And this is how 1 part per million equals 1 pound per acre, because a half of an acre furrow slice is 1 million pounds. I hope that makes sense to everybody. I mean, it's pretty simple, but this is on the assumption that an acre furrow slice weighs 2 million pounds, and it's rare that I ever come across that. Okay. Let me go to the chat, see what I'm missing here. Chris Golder says, I have Tifway 419 directly on Georgia red clay. What would be the best product to help improve the clay soil for the Bermuda? Well, ironically enough, the best product would be the Bermuda, probably. You're not really going to find a product that's going to magically cure your clay. You're going to find a lot of products that claim they'll do that. But the presence of that turfgrass in the clay will exude a lot of compounds and help the soil develop into a more fertile soil. But if you have a clay soil, there's nothing in a bottle that's going to cure that. That's suddenly going to make it more airified or put more air in the soil. There's nothing you can buy to magically cure that. Okay. So yeah, there's no product. I wouldn't be buying products trying to cure my clay soil. I would be really aware of the water problem you're going to have with clay soils, i.e. probably holding too much water, not draining enough water off. If you're sloped, you're in good luck. But if you're flat and you have clay, then the water's going to sit there. So what I would be doing in your case is I'd be really honing in on controlling the water as best I can. Okay. And I would not be over applying water. That'd probably be your Achilles heel in that situation. I would be probably under applying water until I figured out that fine line of how much water do I need to keep the turf growing at the level I want it to. I wouldn't start over applying it and try to back off. I'd back off and then slowly creep the water up. I'd be alleviating light stresses and light problems, be aware of the temperature issues and so forth. But there's no product in a bottle that's going to cure any of that, Chris. Sorry. Chris Golder says again, are products like Carbon Pro G, biochar, compost, humic acid, or humichar, biochar, humic acid, a waste of money? Well, the pragmatist, the practitioner in me says, yes, it's a waste of money. The scientist in me can't say that. I can't say it's a waste of money. I would say your money's probably better spent in other areas than that. If you constantly applied compost, or maybe even biochar, depending on where you get it from, for many, many, many years at very high rates, it's possible you could build up and adjust the soil by doing that. It's going to cost you a ton of money. But it's possible. As a scientist, I would say it's possible. As a practitioner, as a pragmatist, I'd say there's many, many better ways to spend your money than doing that. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so Joe Callan Andrews says, yeah, that was a waste of money. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, some of these I don't understand. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Some of those I'm not 100% sure on what the question is. Maybe you're talking to each other. I'm not sure, which is fine. But okay, we continue because there's still a whole lot to go to. Like a lot. Okay, I put too much in here tonight, but it's just the way it is. Because I'm going to be on vacation, and I'm going to be traveling all over the world, and so I'm getting it all in here tonight. Just bear with me. I mean, it's still a lot to go to. Okay. All right. From an email, do I have an opinion on the GCSAA pushing products like this? Personally, it is one of the biggest disagreements with a professional organization like this. I am a member of the GCSAA, but it seems as though they are just farming our emails for advertising revenue. Shouldn't they be leading the fight against stuff like this unless it's proven? Just curious what my opinion is, a golf course superintendent. So the product that came to his email was this product called Thatchzyme. I don't get these emails from the GCSA. I am a member of the GCSA, but I don't get these emails. I don't know why I don't get them, but they occasionally will send emails like this out. And this one's from Thatchzyme, and it says proven sprayable thatch control. Now, what I will say is whoops, I'm on the wrong thing here. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Hopefully I didn't have, here's the email. Sorry if I had that in the wrong thing. Sorry. And here's the Thatchzyme. Now, what I will say is this particular email with this particular product actually has merit. If you go back, the superintendent sent me that email, if you're listening, if you'll go back on the channel about a year and a half ago, I went over thatch for about a month. And then there I had 2 authors. I went over several papers. Drove me almost insane because I'm not a thatch guy. It bored me to death. Sorry guys. I'm not a thatch person. But I went over all those papers. And in those papers, really no product did anything unless it contained an enzyme called lykase. And in this paper, in here, it says how it works. Thatchzyme delivers an effective dose of lykase, the enzyme proven to break down thatch. So this particular product, Thatchzyme, has merit to it because it contains lykase. Now, I don't know if it has enough in there. They say it does. I don't know if it has enough that would result in reductions in thatch. But this particular email with this particular advertisement, I wouldn't toss away. I mean, it's possible. Okay. And there's some evidence to support it. At least 2 papers that I know of would support the application of a product like this containing lykase, okay? Now, let me just say this about the GCSAA. I do interact with the GCSAA quite a bit, and I will say I don't know much about their emails. I don't know much about how they do their business, but the little bit that I have interacted with the GCSAA, they are very sensitive. At least I get the impression that they're very sensitive about their email list and about sending emails to their members, okay? They are aware they get a lot of emails, okay? And they do, at least I get the impression that they are aware of that, and they do try to manage that effectively if they can. But my message to the GCSAA would be, here's an email directly from one of your members with their opinion on it about this particular issue. So I don't really have an opinion because I don't get those emails. This particular one was probably not a good example for the superintendent's position because this particular product does have some evidence to support it, but I'm sure there's a lot of emails that come through that don't have evidence to support it, is what this superintendent is saying. So I'll leave it at that, and we'll move to the next comment. Dr. Shaddox, I came across this on a message board and wanted to know if this was true. The claim is that the effect of ammonium sulfate has on soil pH is negligible if soil calcium and magnesium reserves are high. The person also stated that the only time ammonium sulfate significantly acidifies the soil is if the soil pH is under 6. Thanks for all you do. I left the name off of there. I don't know I don't know the context of what this was. I hesitate to say anything because I don't know exactly what's going on there. But I'm just going to read this just straight as if they had it on here. The claim is that ammonium sulfate has on soil pH is negligible if the soil calcium magnesium reserves are high. That's mostly nonsense. I don't know where they get that from. I'm going to show you a paper on that here in a second. But more importantly, the person also stated that the only time ammonium sulfate significantly acidifies the soil is if the soil is already under 6. The person doesn't know what they're talking about. If this is true, if this is what somebody said, I don't know. I'm not reading what they said. I'm reading what someone said they said. So it's not comfortable doing that, but whatever. I'm going to show you a publication from the world's greatest soil turfgrass scientists, published in 1979, correcting pH-induced manganese deficiencies in Bermuda grass turf. The claim was that ammonium sulfate will not adjust the soil pH unless it's already below 6. In 1975, this professor started applying ammonium sulfate to this particular plot, and the pH started at 7.2, 7.3. And over the next 2 or 3 years, actually over the next 1 year, the pH dropped from 7.2 to 5 or to 4.7, right here, about 4.7, okay? So whatever that person is claiming, I don't know the context of what they said, but they're saying that it's not effective unless it starts below 6. Here's a perfect example of what they're saying is just not true. They don't know what they're talking about. They're ignorant on this issue. And the only reason it didn't continue, the pH didn't continue to drop down below 4.7 is if you read up here, it says ammonium nitrate was substituted for ammonium sulfate from March through July 1977 and from November 1977 to the end of the study in an attempt to keep the pH above 5. So in other words, they lowered the pH down so low, they were worried about it. So like, man, this got down low. And in this particular soil, the malic 3 calcium and magnesium are very high. Calcium's above 1,000. Oh, magnesium's not that high. Magnesium's actually marginal. It's like 50 or 60 parts per million. The calcium's above 1,000. So here's an example of a rough read paper refuting what this person said. Supposed person said on this supposed board. I really don't like he said and you said. No, that's getting into like whatever. But if this person actually claimed that this ammonium sulfate wouldn't reduce it, wouldn't acidify the soil, he's dead wrong. And if it's because calcium magnesium reserve, it won't do it enough calcium magnesium reserves are high, he's again dead wrong because this one reduced it down very, very low from 7.5, basically 7.3 down below 5. And in both cases, it refutes this particular person's claim. So don't believe it. I would go to somebody else if that's what they're claiming. I wouldn't have much confidence in they know what they're talking about. Sorry. It's just the way it is. Next question. I have accumulated a few questions from your videos and from general conversations with my supers while visiting properties. I appreciate your feedback. So here's some questions from a superintendent. I'm not sure every lab does this, but I see Brookside reports the most, and they provide the parts per million of nitrate and ammonia, but it's ammonium. He misprinted that. That's fine on a soil test. I've never really given this any consideration, but recently had a super say this helps make decisions on fertility. What am I missing with this info? You're not missing anything, Mr. Superintendent. Yeah, nitrate and ammonium on soil tests are useless, except, like I said, there's a little bit of evidence on ion exchange resins in cool season grasses. But again, I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in that. We're nowhere in the universe confident enough to actually go out and recommend these products or not recommend products based upon nitrate and ammonium in the soil. They're very transformative. You're not missing anything. Don't believe it. So don't worry about nitrate and ammonium on a soil test. Sticking with the Brookside reports, I know a few other report this as well. They provide phosphorus level as easily extractable, which I believe is their Malic 3 test, and a Bray 2 test, which is in most cases a higher number. What are your thoughts on why they do this? They're not talking about Malic 3 in this case. What they're talking about in this case, where they provide two different phosphorus, they usually call it a weak phosphorus or a strong phosphorus, or a weak Bray or a strong Bray. What that is, the weak Bray and the strong Bray are two different soil tests that extract different quantities of phosphorus. Both tests have the same concentration of ammonium fluoride, but they have different concentrations of hydrochloric acid. The weak Bray has, someone can look it up and help me. I can't remember. You guys probably can pull it up. It's like 0.025 molar hydrochloric, or 0.25 molar, no, that's too high. 0.025 molar hydrochloric acid, and then the strong Bray would have like 0.1 molar hydrochloric acid, or something like that. Someone can look it up and show me if I'm wrong. The weak Bray is simply extracting a smaller portion of phosphorus that is intended to give the end user an indication as to how much phosphorus may be more soluble than not soluble. The stronger Bray is going to extract phosphorus that is more tightly bound on soils or on organic matter or whatever the case might be. So, for example, if you had a test come back that had no weak phosphorus in it, but had all strong phosphorus in it, that would indicate that there's very little soluble phosphorus in the soil, and that that soil might still need a little phosphorus if none of it's releasing. Versus you have all weak phosphorus and no strong phosphorus. That means you probably just put down some fertilizer and all of it's soluble, and there's no reserve in the soil for the plant to pull from in the future. That's what that means. It's a bad example, or a bad explanation, but that gives you an idea what it is. In the recent nanobubbles episode, you briefly said at one point treating water for biological controls could be beneficial, or at least more so than the reasons of the research you went over. This is an issue in our courses in Florida from snails, bryozoa, among other critters. Acid injection is my preferred method, as I think it improves water quality for the turf as well as in high pH settings above 8, and I have seen benefits from using it firsthand. That said, it is not cheap, and maybe I'm seeing something because I want to see something to justify the cost. Thoughts? Well, acid injection is useful. I didn't go over any of the articles on nanobubbles in terms of their reduction in soil microbial activity or microbes in the water, but I do know that it exists. I can go over that if you want me to. But both of those solutions, the nanobubbles and the acidifying solutions, have been shown to reduce these biological issues in pond water and things like that. So I would just go with whichever one's least expensive. I imagine it'd be the acidifying solution would be the least expensive, but I'm not an expert in that area, so don't go by what I say. Look in the literature, but I'm pretty confident that literature exists supporting both methods. Availability of nutrients. Number 4, which I believe is on your BS list, is extremely common to hear. In one of your episodes, you mentioned this is possible for one or some nutrients. I do not recall the one you mentioned. I have simply been looking at the parts per million of each nutrient, and if it's clearly above the recommended ranges provided by yourself or MLSN, which are fairly close to one another, I don't apply. What should I be looking for to consider if the nutrient is available or not? This might be a technical in nature, so if you have an article or paper I can read, that would be great. Yeah, that's what I was mentioning earlier. There's nothing you're going to find that's going to indicate that it's going to be soluble or available. The soil test isn't going to do that. Okay. You could do that with, I guess that's what the saturated paste claim they can do. And they will remove what's soluble. That saturated paste will be soluble, but there's no correlation between that value and a turf response because that value rapidly changes over time. What value you just pulled out of that soil on a saturated paste, and you go, okay, well, it needs phosphorus or it doesn't need phosphorus. Well, the soil already changed by the time you got that number. In other words, the soil is highly buffered usually. And it's only in soilless media where the saturated paste might be useful. Okay. So yeah, there is no test that's going to show soluble phosphorus or plant available phosphorus. I mean, not to the end users. You're not going to find any tests that are useful in that regard. Next one. Hi, Travis. Hang on. Let me get a Okay. Okay. Love what you're doing in regards to providing factual evidence-based solutions and understanding to the turfgrass industry that is often comprised of strong opinions and claims rather than facts and research-based data. We'll love you to go through this post from Reddit on a future video. Oh, I didn't have this pulled up. How do I get this open? How do I just click on it? Let me see if I can get this open. Okay, let's see if I can get to this Reddit thing. I think I got it up. Did I get it up? I don't know. Let me see. Let me go to this. Give me a second, guys. I'm going to try to get this Reddit post up. Yeah, thanks for showing about this. I don't know anything about Reddit. I don't go to Reddit. I don't go to Facebook. I don't do any of this stuff. It's not... I mean, it's not that it's bad. I just don't do it. And I don't know, old school. I don't know. All right. So let's read through this real quick. It's rather long, but I'm going to move as fast as I can. Remember, I'm not going to be back for a long, I'll be back. I'll be gone for a while. So now you're going to get the fill of me here. So, okay, let's go. It says, in this Reddit, it says something lawn care. It says list of common lawn myths and misconceptions and some common beliefs that are in fact true. How did he do this? Myths. Pre-emergence prevent weeds. Fact. Pre-emergence reduce germination of the seeds of specific plants. Pre-emergence used in lawns are selective. Oh, this is a guy who's just going over like myths or facts and then giving his opinion on them, I think. Pre-emergence used in lawn cares are selective. They have to be, or else they'd injure grass too. Yeah, that's true. The common pre-emergence like prodiamine, pendimethalin, dithiopyr affect mostly grassy weeds and are very few broadleaf weeds. Isoxaben, I think that's spelled wrong. The The go-to pre-emergent for broadleaf weeds, pre-emergents need to be applied with specific intent to reduce specific weeds, which requires selective specific pre-emergents and applying them at specific rates and times. I'm not a weed biologist, but pre-emergents reduce the germination of weeds, except for it's like something like oxidizone that doesn't prevent it from germinating. I think it functions differently, but I don't think you can do that in lawns. So yeah, pre-emergents reduce the germination of certain weed seeds. That's true. Okay. Fact, or myth number 2, 2,4-D is a good herbicide for controlling broadleaf weeds. Fact, 2,4-D is a good ingredient to use in combination with other broadleaf herbicides. It is safe for our grass types. 2,4-D is a very old herbicide, and therefore many weed populations have developed some amount of resistance to it. Now, I don't know if that's true. I'm not a weed biologist. If this whole thing's about weeds, this is going to be a boring read because I don't know anything about weeds. Sorry. Using a single herbicide with a single mode of action raises the risk of weed becoming resistant. That's probably true, yeah, from my understanding at least. At least 2 active ingredients for broadleafs should be used at a time. If you're using, I would not necessarily 2 active ingredients, but 2 different classes if you can do it, like classes of herbicides. I think that's what most weed biologists ask people to do. MCPP, triclopyr, fluroxypyrin, quinclorac. Some researchers suspect that quinclorac may have 2 modes of action. Okay. That's could be true. I don't know. Never pull nut sedges. Myth number 3. Pulling nut sedge can provide great control as long as you continue to scout for new growth and pull it before a new growth develops its 4th leaf. Yeah, I pull a lot of nut sedge in my front lawn, but the idea is that when you pull it up, it's probably not going to kill it because there's a tuber down below you didn't get out or whatever. I pull it just because I'm sitting there looking at it. Why not pull it? I don't have that much, but I have a bunch of it. I wouldn't be out there pulling it. I'd probably be spraying it. The next myth is tenacity controls poa annu and poa triv. Oh, I don't know anything about that. Oh, no, he says nope. Mesotrione can reduce germination of poa. I don't think anything controls both of them except for that velocity DM or PM, whatever that thing's called. That seems to have some control over it. I think there might be another product that came around, Poa Cure or something like that. I'm not a POA person, so I'm going to skip past that. I don't have any clue if that's true or not. It says POA annu isn't strictly an annual. It can be spread via, yeah, I don't know if any of that's true, but it's very difficult to control. I did apply some, that velocity, I think is what it's called, and it did help. I had to hit it at the right time, but there's some POA out there right now. I'll probably try to do it again this year. But when I killed the POA out, I had POA triv and POA annu. When I killed the POA out, I had a dead spot, so I had to reseed it in there. So it's a trick. You got to, get the seed in there and germinate it so it's not a bare soil, so the weed doesn't germinate again the next year. It's a management program, really. Fertilizers. Okay, here's something I can do. Switching to bullet points, granular iron products or any source of non-soluble or non-chelated iron do genuinely nothing for the grass. Oh yeah, good. So whoever wrote that's good. They know what I'm talking about there. Good. Iron is not directly available to grass. It has to be chelated in order for grass to take it in. Well, that's not technically true, but in soil that happens over the course of decades. Chelated liquids iron applications do get taken up by grass. Yeah, that's pretty much true. I'm not going to argue over that. Yeah, that's all true. Iron doesn't have to be chelated. I mean, there's plenty of plants growing in the Amazon forest with no chelates out there. The plant can exude natural chelates, or it can exude hydrogen ions to lower the acidity right at the rhizosphere. There's 2 strategies for the plant to take up iron. One is chelation, but one is acidification. So either one of them would work. Diesel exhaust fluid is a silly thing to use as fertilizer. Yes, it contains urea. It is. Oh, that came up on my show the other day. I didn't know what it costs. Urea is so DEF is 15% nitrogen. Okay, I don't know if that's true, but that's okay. In a 2.5 gallon jug. So he goes through the cost of it. Seems like the typical price for a 2.5 gallon jug is about $14. That comes out to $4 per pound of nitrogen, which is high. That is extremely high. It's still cheap compared to liquid fertilizers, which also contain potassium and sometimes phosphorus, but it's not good to compare it reasonably. If that's the case where it's $4 per pound in, that's off the chart high. That's crazy high for soluble nitrogen. So I wouldn't be buying DEF if you're looking for the most cost-effective source of spraying out urea. Just buy some spray-grade urea. It's probably a fraction of the cost. As a continuation of the last one, liquid fertilizers are way more expensive than granular fertilizers per pound of nutrient. Yeah, that's true too. So whoever wrote that, I don't know who this guy is wrote it, but whoever wrote that's almost entirely correct. Yeah. Insects myth: X product controls grubs. There are only 4 chemicals that definitely control all species of grubs consistently: trichlorophon, carbaryl, chlorantraniliprole, which I went over, and imidacloprid. Yeah, I don't know. I know chlorantraniliprole and imidacloprid. I don't know about carbaryl, which is 7, and I don't know about trichlor. I don't know any of this stuff. Some of the biologicals like BT and nematodes can sometimes work. I don't know if any of that's true. I can't answer any of those questions. Moles and voles are similar. I don't know what he's going to say, but no, that's not true. Oh, that's the myth. Oh, sorry. Okay, so that's the myth. Let me get back on the myth. Moles and voles are similar. Yeah, in fact, moles and voles are so he's right about that too. Moles exclusively live below ground, and their bodies are built for digging and tunneling. They eat insects and worms. Voles are not very good at digging. It's rare for voles to do any sort of visible digging in a lawn. The voles will make those little tunnels underneath the ice, or make tunnels underneath like leaves and things like that. If you leave them on your lawn, you'll see these little paths in your mulch. If you have snow in your area and the snow melts, you'll see, if it's on there for very long, you'll see these little paths in your mulch and on your lawn. Those are vole tracks. Yeah, so moles and voles are different. I don't know how to control either one. I have some traps that I use for actually I should have brought one up, but for moles, the only trap I've ever used that ever actually caught a mole, I have some in my basement, and it's about 10% effective. 10 or 15% of the time I'll catch a mole. That's pretty good, I think. So I'll set it, and about every 4th or 5th time, 6th time I'll set it, I'll catch a mole with it. That's not bad, I think. And I have 2 or 3 traps, so, it works. But voles, it's more like a mouse. Getting rid of grubs will get rid of moles. Yeah, I don't think so. Moles are eating, moles eat earthworms. Yeah, I think he's right about that. Getting rid of grubs will not get rid of them. I think he's probably correct about that. I don't know, though. Repellents work well. I don't think they do. Oh, he says they don't. Yeah, whoever wrote this seems to be pretty solid. Sonic repellents really don't work. Scent-based repellents can work for some rodents if used very strategically. I've tried a lot of that stuff. I've tried repellents. I've tried those sonic things. I've tried road flares. I've tried all sorts of stuff. Smokes, crazy stuff. And the only thing I've ever seen to work is 2 things. That trap that I have in my basement, which is a little metal, flingy looking little trap, but it works great, and a shovel. That's it. If you're patient, you can get them with the shovel, and I've probably taken out 4 or 5 in my lawn, and the trap's probably taken out another 3 or 4 in my lawn, something like that. So I'm more effective than the trap, but you got to be patient. You got to sit out there and wait for them. Maybe I'll put that on a video or something. Pine needles are acidify the soil. That is definitely not true. What does he say? Pine needles simply do not. Oh, this guy's good. Who is this guy writing this? Niles and stuff? Is this guy's? Is it? I don't know Reddit. I have too much knowledge about grass. You want some? I don't know who this Niles guy is or girl is. I don't know. But so far, I'm on his side. He seems to be pretty solid. Pine needles don't acidify the soil. Yeah, they don't. It's like the puddle analogy. Like the pine trees happen to grow well in acidic soils, and then the pine needles fall, and it's in acidic soil. The soil is already sick. That's the reason the pine tree is growing there. It's like the puddle. A conscious puddle wakes up and says, "Oh, look, my body fits this hole perfectly." No, your body, that's the form it was. That's the way the hole was when you got in it. Okay? It's the same thing with pine needles and acidifying the soil. There's no acidifying effect. You will find probably one paper here or there, but the pine needles generally are not associated, or not the cause of this acidifying the soil. No, they're there because the soil is acidic. That's the reason the pine trees grow in there. That's my understanding. I'm not an arborist, so I don't know, but that's my understanding. Let's do this one. Leaves and sticks are bad for lawns for X reason. What? Leaves and sticks are awesome for lawns, provided they break up into small pieces. Generally, none of the many common arguments against mulching leaves stick around. Yeah, mulching leaves is usually fine. I would say this about if you have a robot mower, sticks are a pain in the neck, because my particular robot mower gets caught just right in the back of the wheel, and it locks the wheel. It's happened several times. It usually happens about once or twice a season, and it gets stuck out there. I go out there and take it out of the wheel and then let the lawnmower go. But no, sticks and leaves are fine. It's just not in excess. That's all. Spike aeration is pointless. Spike aeration is actually a very beneficial practice. It does exactly what it says in the name. It introduces air into the soil. Grass roots and beneficial microbes need oxygen. Yeah, all that's true. Yeah. This would be something you do. Yeah, this is true. Spike aeration. I mean, if you have the right problem, then you need the right solution for that problem, and aeration can help. Core aeration alleviates compaction. It can, if done enough, yes. Unlike spike aeration, core aeration does remove soil, which does indeed result in temporary reduction in the bulk density of the soil, which is the major measure of the compaction. That's true. Yeah, that's all true. That's definitely true. But that reduction is also temporary. That's true, unless there's plenty of grass roots to hold the soil in the newly loosened position. So basically, aeration can help with compaction if the lawn is already fairly dense. Core aeration, bare soil, thin areas will do almost nothing to reduce compaction unless you immediately spread organic matter. Yeah, I'm okay with all that. Myth: for cool season lawns, you should mow low for the final cut of the year to prevent snow mold. Yeah, don't do that. What does he say? You can mow a notch or two lower, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch for the final cut if you want. Any further will weaken the grass and make it more susceptible for snow mold. Yeah, you don't want to start scalping the soil, the turf down at the end of the year. Just leave it alone. I get it, because the cool season grass will sort of start to kind of wimp down a little bit, kind of flop down. You want to cut it a little lower to keep it a little tighter, make it look a little nicer. I get that idea, but don't go crazy with it. I wouldn't even lower it at all. But if you're going to lower it, don't do it much. You don't want to start inducing some sort of additional stress on the plant when it's already moving into a stressful period, unless there's some benefit to that. You can mow grass whenever. That's the myth. What? You can mow grass whenever, but if you'd like to reduce the risk of turf loss due to injury and disease, you should avoid mowing grass when it's wet or during the hottest part of the day. Yeah, whatever. I mean, you can mow grass when you want to, I guess, unless it's frozen. As long as I apply nitrogen, I can bag clippings without any downsides. Well, clearly not. I mean, yeah. So he says the same thing. Yeah. Keeping clippings on the lawn does so much more for recycling nitrogen. Also recycles phosphorus, potassium, iron, and all of the nutrients. Yeah, it also adds some carbon in the soil and all that stuff. It's a food source for microbes and all sorts of microorganisms and things like that as well. Yeah. We're leaving, again, within reason. Mulching in the soil within reason. If a lawn has a disease or some sort, a lot of weeds, you should wash the mower deck before every time you mow. That's an interesting question. Yeah, he says that does nothing. I heard that question asked to a nematologist, and the nematologist is like, well, if you have nematodes, you're clearly going to spread them, but whether or not that's actually going to increase it further down the road or in a different putting green or whatever, I don't know. So if you're going from one putting green that has nematodes to another putting green that has no nematodes, and you aerify it, and then you move it to the one that has no nematodes, there's a chance you could infect the putting green. It's possible, but anything's possible. Is it probable? Is actually any evidence to support it? I don't know. And he says that probably does nothing. He's probably right. If a lawn has a disease or some sort or a lot of weeds, you should bag the clippings. There's actually a little bit of truth to this. Oh, disease or weeds. Yeah, bagging clippings would be by no means prevent the spread of the disease or weeds. Again, the wind or animals would be just fine. Bag clippings could reduce the amount that it does spread. That part, that's a myth. That's a myth, is that you should bag clippings. In truth, it won't make a huge difference. It's debatable whether the benefit would be worth the loss of the benefit of mulching the clippings. Yeah, I mean, I think the idea behind that is like you bag the clippings from weeds and you're going to remove the weed seeds or something and reduce the weed population. It's probably unlikely, because the soil is a bank of weed seeds. Millions and millions and millions of weed seeds are already in the soil already. So your pre-emergent herbicide is going to control that. Removing a few seeds off the top is probably not going to have an effect. But again, I'm not a weed biologist. I don't know. Watering. Syringing short midday waterings during the summer is a good way to reduce heat stress. It does alleviate the heat stress, but it also can encourage disease and discourage root growth. I only recommend this practice if you have very sandy soil. This guy might, I don't know what he does. Email me if you feel comfortable. I don't know who this person is, but on bent grass putting greens, and you're in the transition zone or in the northern part of the southern area, you're going to have to syringe some greens in the afternoon to keep those greens alive. I mean, talk to Southern Hills. Like I said, I mean, they're just toast. You're going to 105, 110 degree heats in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You kidding me? Trying to grow bent grass greens for that month?
You got to get out there and syringe those things, keep them wet. And then when it cools down, the whole wintertime, you're a champion. But keep them alive. You got to keep them cooled down in the summertime. Only water in the morning. This is pretty much true. He says the more accurate rule would be finish watering just before the sun hits an area. So if an area doesn't get sunlight until 1 p.m., it's best to finish watering that area about 1 p.m. That reduces the amount of time that the leaves spent being wet, which reduces risk of disease. Otherwise, it's okay to occasionally break that rule. Yeah, I would, if I don't water my lawn, but if I do water it, I have to water it during the day because I don't have an irrigation system. So I got to water it with this sprinkler, this walking sprinkler. I'm only going to do that when I'm awake. So I don't have any choices. And I only do that when I have no other option. And the turf grass is like, this is going to die if I don't get this water out here. It's going to cook it. But if you have a system, yeah, try to get the water off of it before the hottest part of the day. You're just more efficient with the water usage. Watering helps heat stressed grass not be so heat stressed. I don't know what that means. Not really. Grass does use more water when the temps are high, but it doesn't actually help much with the actual damage to the grass from the heat of the day. Some ways it can make it worse by adding the humidity of the air in the grass, which reduces the ability to expel heat via transpiration. The upshot of this is that if the grass has experienced heat stress, increasing the amount or frequency of the water will not reduce the heat. Well, it depends on the grass. I mean, if you got a cool season grass and you're in a really, really hot part of the United States or the world, your turf's going to die if you don't water and keep it cool. Then you're going to have to put some water on it. You might have the wrong plant in the wrong place, but it just depends. I'm not a water person or a plant physiologist, but anyway. Dethatching, it's a bad move 99% of the time. You'll all have seen the Automod comment by now. I don't know what he means by that. Dethatching is necessary when you're overplaying nitrogen, basically. I hate to say that, but thatch isn't really going to develop unless you're applying nitrogen to grow the grass at a greater rate than it's decomposing. So if you need to apply the nitrogen to keep the turf grass looking good and looking happy and looking acceptable, so be it. But if you're over applying nitrogen and the grass is growing greater than it decomposes, you're going to develop thatch. So in that case, you're going to have to dethatch it. But you might argue, why don't you just lower the nitrogen back down a little bit? Figure out that Goldilocks zone. Maybe it's a little lower than what you think, and maybe you won't develop that thatch as much as you have been. Soil amendments. Lime should only be applied to soil that is known to be acidic. Do not under any circumstances apply lime to soil if you do not know what the pH is for sure. I'd agree with that. Those electric pH meters are terrible. Yeah, I agree with that too. That's funny. Never use them. Don't believe me? Check the same spot multiple days in a row at different times of the day. You'll never get the same reading twice. That's good. I like that. Yeah. Electric pH meters are, again, wishful thinking. Gypsum is only useful for adding calcium to soil and flushing out sodium. Gypsum is not useful for any other purpose. Gypsum will not break up clay. The only thing, that's all true, but the only thing I'd say is gypsum is now becoming more useful for sulfate deficiencies because it is, in most cases, the least expensive source of sulfate. But yeah, gypsum will not break up clay. It's useful for calcium deficiencies, and it's useful for alleviating sodic soils and for sulfate deficiencies, yeah. Continue the last one. You don't want to break up clay. Clay actually benefits from flocculation. That's true. Breaking it up would mean causing particle dispersion, which actually increases compaction. Yeah, this guy's correct. Yeah, this guy's right. He's got it. He might be a soil scientist. I don't know who this guy is. Yeah, he's right. He or she is correct. You don't want to break up the clay. You don't want to do that. And that's what the fraudsters say with these aerate. Oh, it breaks up the particles. And or gypsum with what's that product? What's that green product? Something green. Jonathan Green. Oh, it alleviates compaction, breaks up clay. No, you don't want to do that. Even if it did, it's not going to do that. But even if it did do it, you don't want to do that. Good point. Whoever wrote this is good. Sand is the best growing medium for grass with a little improvement. Incorporating organic matter into sand is all that needs to improve it. I don't know if it's the best growing media for grass. I mean, we use sand and putting greens due to a compaction issue because so many people are walking on it. I don't know if I'd agree with that. No, I mean, it's a good medium if you have a lot of traffic and it's going to be compressed or compacted. Sand will resist that, but if you're just growing a normal lawn, nobody's walking over, you're not driving trucks over it, I wouldn't want to grow it in sand. That'd be a very expensive way to do it. You'd have to put a lot into it, I think. It is unwise to spread a significant amount of topsoil, organic matter, or any other texture soil that is vastly different than the native soil. Oh, that's a good question. Oh, that's a good comment. Without incorporating a significant amount of that new into the existing soil, even if you just corrorated beforehand, that helps some of the new soil mix into the deeper layers of the soil. Laying drastically different soil textures on top of each other without incorporating can cause stratification. Which means further separation of hardening, crusting of different types. There are additional issues that arise depending on which type of soil is being applied. Yeah, he's correct. The stratification, I guess that's correct. But what it's referred to in soil science is a textural discontinuity. So if you have a clay and you dump a bunch of sand on top of it, you've created a textural discontinuity that must be satisfied with the water before water can then move into the clay, even if it's more porous on top than on bottom. And if you switched it around and it had sand on bottom and you had clay on top, it would do the same thing. There's a textural discontinuity, that's the only way I can say it, where the texture of this soil above it is vastly different in terms of porosity or sand or clay, or whatever the case is. And that discontinuity can wreak havoc with water movement, and you don't want to do that. So he's right about that too. Yeah, thanks whoever sent that to me. I didn't know it was that long. Probably would have done that on a different episode, but that was a good one. Yeah. Whoever wrote that's pretty good. I'm impressed. Yeah. Whoever sent me that email, thanks. And whoever wrote that stuff, thanks. Coming down to the end here, guys. I told you this was a long episode. Hi, Travis. I am in Southeast North Carolina in Wilmington. I left you a voicemail a while back about nutrient deposition. I really appreciate the insight that you provide on the subject. I just wanted to make a couple of points on soil testing. That is my reasoning for soil testing and its timing during the year. First, I just like data, be it soil or other metrics in life that I find interesting. But secondly, the most important is the timing of my soil test. I prefer a soil analysis in, say, mid to late in the growing season. This way I have a better idea if my nutrient management is correct. I can see the value in sampling during the time of year where your values are lowest, late winter or late winter for him. But if I sampled just one time per year, it would be during the growing season. Do you find merit to my approach? Thank you. I appreciate all the content you create, and I think it's time for some more Ken Corley. Oh yeah, I need to do some more Ken Corley. I need to do some more turf thoughts. I've been lazy about doing turf thoughts. Well, the value in doing soil sampling like during your program, during your application season, is limited within the context of trying to figure out whether or not you have enough of the nutrient. You could say you have enough or don't have enough of the nutrient based upon your application of that nutrient. So if you applied the nutrient, if you took a soil test, in other words, and you didn't have enough, then clearly you got a problem, clearly. If you're out there applying phosphorus and potassium, your phosphorus is 5 and your potassium is 10 parts per million, even after you applied it, then you have an issue. But that's probably not going to happen. Probably what's going to happen is you're going to find your nutrients are well above any critical limit because you're taking the soil test after you applied the nutrients. So it begs the question, how do you know you need to apply it if you're taking a soil test after you've applied it? Does that make sense? So you mentioned in your email, it did make sense to you. You just want to kind of see how your program is affecting the numbers, and that's, okay, I guess. But the purpose of a soil test is to give the end user confidence on whether or not a given element should be applied, and confidence in whether or not that applied element is going to result in a plant response in one way or the other. That's the purpose. So if you're using the soil test in some other way, like you want to see number changes over time or whatever, then you're just using a soil test in a manner in which it wasn't intended. If you just want to see the numbers. I just wouldn't be applying nutrients based upon that if you're taking the test after you've applied the nutrient. That's all. Good question. Good morning, Dr. Shaddox. Hope all is well. My question is on the blend of fertilizer. I'm thinking about ordering a 30-00 with 60% slow release nitrogen. So the rest of it's ammonium sulfate. 40% ammonium sulfate, 60% slow release nitrogen. Is there enough slow release nitrogen in this mix to see a result 6 or 7 weeks later? Can we go out with 0.75 pounds of N or need a full pound of N to get that result we'd like to see in week 6 or 7? How do you find out the amount of N that would be released with a slow-release nitrogen fertilizer weeks later after the application? I know this is a loaded question with multiple things to consider, like rainfall, temp, watering schedule, but in a perfectly normal situation. Yeah, it's going to be difficult to answer that question at the end, but let me answer the first part first. Is 60% slow-release nitrogen worth it? Are you going to see a response from that? Well, it's going to depend on your rate. So let's start with 100% slow release, and we'll change to 60 in a minute. 100% slow release, I think we'd all agree, really regardless of the slow release, if you apply 0.1 pounds or less, you're probably not going to see a response in turfgrass at 0.1 pounds in, say a month, 0.1 pounds in a month. You're not going to see a response. 0.2 pounds in, you're probably not going to see a response. 0.3 pounds of N of slow release, you're probably not going to see a response. You're going to have to get up to like 0.5 or 0.6 pounds or more to see a response from slow release nitrogen and applied to turf grasses. Okay, even the really quick slow releases, like the really short polymer coat releases, you're going to have to get like a half a pound or 0.6 pounds or more to get a response out of that. So to answer your question, when you go to 60% slow release nitrogen, well, think of it in terms of pounds of slow release at your rate that you're applying. So if you're applying 1 pound of nitrogen and 60% of that 1 pound is slow release, then you're applying 0.6 pounds of nitrogen as slow release, and you're probably going to see some value in that. But if you're applying it at, say, 0.75 pounds, as you mentioned, I don't know, you might not get what you think you're going to get out of that. Because you're only going to be applying like 0.4 pounds or 0.3 pounds of slow release nitrogen over that 6 or 7 week period. Think of it as like the amount of nitrogen that the turf grass is going to need over a given time period, over a given week. And you can base a lot of that on the growth rate of your turf. If you know the turf grass is going to have, say, 3% nitrogen or 4% nitrogen in the turf grass tissue, and it's going to grow so many kilograms per hectare per day, you can predict how much nitrogen you need to apply to maintain that given growth rate. And it's going to be more than 0.3 or 0.4 pounds of slow release nitrogen. Okay. So I would think you'd be fine at 1 pound at 60% slow release nitrogen. I think you'd be fine. If you're going to drop down there too low, you might as well just go with 100% slow release, soluble. Just go with ammonium sulfate and move on, because you're probably going to get a pretty long response from that ammonium sulfate anyway. Or just go 100% slow release and put out 0.75 pounds of 100% slow release instead of trying to cut it. It's when you try to dilute one with the other, when you start kind of fidget with that, the value in the slow release is diminished greatly. And I don't think you're going to get what you think you're going to get out of it at those lower rates. And the next question was, how do you find the amount of N that would be released? That's not going to be easy to do. There's some methodologies you can use in the lab, but even those are questionable. I got to get going. I got to get moving here pretty quick. I'm already at 2 hours. But I would think of it as pounds of the slow release or pounds of the soluble that need to go out over that time period and to impart a response. And whatever that pounds are, then you can go to the rate and the percentages and so forth and figure it out from there. Oh yeah, this is great. This is the last part here. We're coming down the very end. Okay, Twitter. Out of curiosity, when a company like Lesco produces a flagship liquid end product such as this, what moves them to add sulfur and manganese? Is it data-driven, or does the extra nutrition offset the high cost of nitrogen? So it's a 1200 with manganese and sulfur and iron. The sulfur is going to come into products like this because they have to come in, because that's the source of the iron and manganese sulfate or iron sulfate. So the sulfate just comes in and tags along. They don't intentionally put sulfate in there. It's just the source of the raw material. But the manganese and the iron, I wouldn't say hardly any of these companies are doing this from an agronomic perspective. Like, oh, we know this is going to be part of turfgrass response. Manganese is going to be part of turfgrass response. I would say the majority are doing it because they're convinced that the end user is going to see that and be convinced that it's going to turn it green, and they're going to buy it rather than not buy it. But in this case, it has iron and manganese in it, and there's a pretty good chance that 1200 right there that I have on the screen, where is this right here? Whoops, right here. It's a pretty good chance that's going to turn some grass green. It's got nitrogen, it's got iron, it's got manganese, it's got sulfate. That's going to be a pretty solid product applied at the right rate. Twitter, interesting how you cut this part out. I said this is in response to the video I did on Joel Simmons and Oli Pool.
He said, Robert Searle says, interesting how you cut this part out. How can anyone not be reluctant to share their expertise these days when the video will be cut up into sound bites for whatever reason? I don't know what SMH stands for. Well, I hope they're reluctant to share their expertise. These guys aren't experts. Well, they're experts in BS. They have black belts in BS, for sure. So Oli Pool, if you don't know him, he's, I think he's more of a victim, to be frank. And then there's Joel Simmons, who likes to go and preach base saturation and saturated paste and all these other things that are not evidence-based management practices. And if my content results in them sharing less of their videos, then I've succeeded on some small level. But don't have any delusions. They're not experts in anything other than nonsense. Okay? It's just a reality. There was another YouTube, Twitter thing that I was going to go into, but I'm not going to go into it because it's very long and I don't have time. 2 hours is this is the longest video I ever did. I told you it's going to be long, but I'll have to do the next Twitter thing. It's probably 20 minutes to go over the next Twitter thing, and I'm not going to do that tonight. I don't have time. I'm already 2 hours in. Okay. I will go through the chat one last time to see if there's anything extra that you want me to go over. Yeah, I don't know your answer, Scott Graves. It says, speaking of compost, does leaf mold compost fall into the same category? Here in the Houston area, we hear a lot about the benefits of top dressing with it. Claims it helps with St. Augustine filling. I don't have any clue. Compost is like biochar. There's so many different types and ways and all sorts of different things. The reality is, compost is probably going to have some nitrogen in it. It's probably going to have some phosphorus in it. And it's probably going to have a food source for the microbes to do whatever they do. So, composts are probably good. If applied correctly, they're probably good. Yeah, definitely. Holy cow, Ashanti. Wow. Thank you so much. Thanks for the donation. He says, thank you for your knowledge. Please enjoy a beer or lunch on me, maybe a small lunch after your YouTube takes their cut. After YouTube takes their cut. That's true. YouTube does. I don't know what they take. They take like 40%. Take a 30, whatever it is, a huge cut. Thanks for the $50 donation. That's above and beyond. Thanks so much, Ashanti. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I think that's all I'm going to do. Oh, he says shaking my head. Okay, yeah. That's all I'm going to do, guys. Thanks again, Shani, for the donation that helps support turfgrass research and helps support this channel. I'll be back in like 2 weeks, and then I'll be gone for like 2 or 3, 4 weeks. So I got a long gap here. So I'll try to cut this up for you guys and use the little bits and pieces. Sorry it took so long. I told you to sit back and relax and enjoy the ride wherever you're at, because it was going to be a long episode, and sure enough, I was correct. So have a good couple of weeks. I'll be in wherever it is, New Hampshire, or I'll be up there in Connecticut somewhere next week. Come by and say hello. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Even for the members, I won't be here for a couple of weeks. And we'll fill it back up with some more turfgrass information in a couple more weeks, guys. Okay? Have a good break wherever you're at. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thanks. Bye.